Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Emily Ferrier, here to bring you some uplifting stories during this trying time. Tons of children are currently in self-isolation, and they're about to be receiving messages of comfort from none other than Spider-Man himself. That's because Jake Johnson, the voice actor who played Peter Parker in the recent superhero film Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, has offered to record personalized voice messages for kids who may be having a hard time coping in the quarantine. Earlier this week, Johnson published an Instagram post saying, since the quarantine, a lot of parents have DM'd me saying that they've been watching Spider-Verse with their kids. A lot. So, here's my idea. If your child is at home from school and wants a quick, encouraging message from Peter B. Peter, then send me an email with their name, and I'll try to send over a short voice note. Since demand for the messages is likely to be high, Johnson apologized in advance for any emails he might fail to respond to, but he still hopes that this post will encourage families and their kids to stay home during these shutdowns. Johnson, who has also starred in the television comedy series New Girl and Jurassic World, says parents can request a comforting voice message from Spider-Man by emailing their child's name to Peter B. Parker says hi @gmail.com. And also on the internet was a how to keep kids happy and engaged whilst homeschooling and having to stay inside the home from families in Italy that have been dealing with this for a little bit longer than we have. So number one, start with what interests them. School presents a curriculum to children which they have little choice about. At home, they have a little bit more choice, and they frequently refuse. Instead, start with what fascinates them. Follow their questions and do some research into that. Top topics in this person's house included how viral DNA works, travel restrictions in World War II, how glue works, the French Revolution, and how to decorate wooden boxes. No question is too trivial. And children do actually have quite a strong opinion about what they want to learn about, what fascinates them. Why not, lean into that? Focus on connection. Make your aim connecting with your child, rather than getting them to do things. This is strange, an unusual time for everyone. Make time to do special things together. Have a family movie night. Turn the lights off, cuddle up under the duvet, and watch it all together. Bake a cake and have a tea party. Lay the table and dress up. Make it an occasion. Join your child in their activities rather than trying to persuade them to do something else. If they resist all your suggestions, stop making them. Instead, Join them in doing what interests them. If that's Lego, do Lego. If it's painting, try that. If it's video games, ask them if you can play too. Learn how to play Minecraft or Fortnite. You might be surprised by how much you enjoy it. Games, games, games. Games are fun for everyone. If you have board games, go and explore your cupboard and pull out the games you haven't tried for ages. If you don't, there are multiplayer tablet versions of many Fortnite games, including Cluedo, Monopoly, Exploding Kittens, Carcassonne, Ticket to Ride, Settlers of Catan, and the Game of Life. Some of them, like Cluedo, you can play far away from friends if they also have the app. These games are well worth the investment of a few euros, and the tablet versions are generally much cheaper than the physical game. Explore the full potential of your screens. This is not the time to impose rigid screen time bans. It's the time to exploit all the potential of the devices that you might have. Odds are that there are things in your smartphones and tablets that you've never tried. Young kids will enjoy playing with the calculator app, and it helps them understand numbers and math. Take photos and edit them. Try out filters and special effects. Take videos. Make a movie using the free video editing softwares. Try making a stop motion film. Again, using free apps. There are many tutorials on YouTube. Make a podcast, like I'm doing, recording yourself. There's so many things out there that are creative and learning, and there's so many apps to get them Duolingo. Help them learn a new language. Virtual play dates. Okay, we're all in this together. Contact your child's friends and ask if they would like to hang out over Zoom, WhatsApp, or Skype. Younger children find it hard to know what to say, so suggest an activity. Kids can draw, play games, or go about their lives with a friend virtually there. Read and listen. Again, start with what interests them, not what you think they should be learning. Find books on the Kindle app. If you've read your whole bookcase, think about books that you loved as a child and try those out on your kids. Audible has a library full of books for those that are preferring to listen. If anyone hasn't discovered Stephen Fry reading Harry Potter, now's the time. Hours of joy. Keep moving. Even if you don't get out, try to keep active. Try Cosmic Kids Yoga, do exercise programs on your game console, download a circuit training app, construct obstacle courses in your front room. Put neighbors on and dance. Neighbors will understand. Sing like no one's listening. Sing songs with your children, even if you think you can't sing. The Quarantine Choir on YouTube has short videos to teach you how to sing a song. Musicals are a good place to start if you want to learn some new songs. You can find many of the songs on YouTube, or you can subscribe to Spotify for songs from The Lion King, Mary Poppins, Annie, Aladdin, etc. Les Mis, if you want to get real intense for older children. And look after yourself. This could be a long haul. What do you need to keep yourself healthy and sane? The BBC actually has some helpful tips for looking after your own mental health. Don't check the news constantly. Make sure you cook foods that you like and instigate some time where you're not available to your children, where they can have time to themselves and you can have time to yourself. In our house, this person says, we are educating that we had a non-interruption time that we launch after lunch each day when everyone did something quietly in their rooms, and interruptions were only for emergencies. You have to define emergency quite carefully. I've been interrupted for a yellow pencil before. Children are young, and it's going to take them time to learn, and you might need to build up slowly, minutes at a time. Kids are going to remember this their whole lives. How do you want them to think about it? Feeling in control is hard when the world is so unpredictable, but it's important for our well-being and our kids to help them feeling in control with them and their interests. The only thing that we can control is our own behavior and how we relate to our kids. This is the challenge of a lifetime. When we come back, we're going to talk about nice things for elderly people.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about some things that we can do with our kids to keep them happy and engaged whilst homeschooling and just in general. And now people around the world are finding more and more positive ways to help their neighbors during the outbreaks, from buying groceries for elderly people in self-isolation or sharing toilet paper with those in need. So, when these two young siblings from Columbus, Ohio, heard that their 78-year-old neighbor, Helena Sklem, was self-isolating herself in her home last week, they knew they wanted to do something special for her. After 9-year-old Tarantine and his 6-year-old sister, Calliope, made sure that Sklem was stocked up on groceries, they took it upon themselves to host a spontaneous concert for the senior on her front porch. Taran and Calliope donned their nicest concert clothes before carrying their cellos over to her porch. For 30 minutes, the youngsters played everything from children's tunes to Bach and others, all while maintaining a safe distance from her front row seat of 10 feet away. I've been out of my house for 5 days, and I haven't been out of my house for 5 days, and I won't be out anytime soon, she told the Columbus Dispatch. This was a delightful break for all of us. I love all the kids, and I love the music. It was a real gift. The children's mother, Rebecca Tien, later told CNN that she couldn't have been more proud of her kids for reaching out to their neighbor during such uncertain times. It was one of those moments where you feel like you're a part of something incredible. It's also such a good way to remember the value of connection. Especially at a time when everyone feels disconnected. Just to know that we were a part of something so sweet, even just for a minute, meant a lot. Jackie Borchkart, another local community member, captured a sweet video of the porch concert as she was passing by the house. Since she published footage on Twitter last week, it's been praised by several thousand social media viewers. This is what American values are all about, wrote one Twitter user. We help one another out in a crisis. From the French Revolution to the Arab Spring, here are some other examples of times when music has changed the course of history. The singing revolution in Estonia. Towards the end of the 1980s, while their country was still under the control of the Soviet Union, Estonians voiced their desire for independence the best way they knew how, by singing. Under Soviet rule, Estonian national songs and hymns were forbidden, but the dissatisfaction with foreign rule mounted. People began to sing these songs publicly as an act of defiance. These protests culminated with the Song of Estonia festival in 1988, where 300,000 people, over a quarter of the country's entire population, gathered to sing national songs and hear speeches by independence leaders. The bonds created by the communal singing were strong. 2 years later, when Soviet tanks rolled into the country to destroy radio and television towers, Estonian citizens formed human shields to drive the tanks away. On August 20th, 1991, thanks in part to the singing revolution, Estonia gained its independence without military action. La Marseillaise in France. During the French Revolution of 1789 to 1799, protest songs could be heard not only in the streets, but in the opera houses, theaters, and ballrooms of Paris. The reigning aristocrats of the time commissioned famous painters like Joseph Haydn to write music for their grandiose public ceremonies, while revolutionary leaders commissioned composers to write operas celebrating revolutionary causes. Meanwhile, people took to the streets singing popular revolutionary songs like Caïra and La Marseillaise. In total, 3,000 of these songs were written during the French Revolution, the most popular of the songs being Les Marseillaise, and it became the unofficial anthem of the revolution. And after the abolition of the monarchy, it became the official anthem of the French Republic. Radio B92 in Serbia. When Slobodan Milosevic led Serbia into a series of brutal ethnic wars in the 90s, his regime controlled virtually every form of media in the country. One small radio station, however, continued to broadcast independently. As Serbia headed towards totalitarianism, Radio B92 became one of the only sources in the country for non-government controlled news. The station's programmers organized protest against the government, reported on human rights violations by the regime, and played a steady stream of anti-authoritarian rock and hip-hop songs by artists like Sonic Youth and NWA. For those left behind in Serbia during the NATO bombings, B92 became the soundtrack to hope and the resistance. Although the station was shut down by the government in May 2000, they continued to broadcast online until Milosevic was defeated in an election 5 months later. Nueva Canción in Chile. In the 50s and 60s, native people from rural Chile moved to cities in large numbers, bringing with them their traditional songs and instruments. Of these traditional music styles, blended with the modern sounds of the city, new style of music called Nueva Canción, the new song of movement, was born. While this musical style shared some similarities with traditional Chilean folk music, the songwriters used their lyrics to denounce the oppressive political regime of the day and to urge people to rise up against the government. This was the music that ushered Salvador Allende, Chile's first democratically elected socialist leader, into the presidency in 1970, as he greeted crowds in Santiago under a banner which read, "You can't have a revolution without songs." 3 years later, Augusto Pinochet seized power in a military coup, and soon after taking control of the country, tortured and executed Victor Jara, one of the leaders of the Nueva Canción movement. The regime also banned the use of traditional folk instruments. Despite the opposition, Nueva Canción has continued to flourish through the work of artists in South America who use their music to speak out against injustices of all kinds. I have two more of these quick little stories of the times that music has changed the course of history. So we'll talk about those after the break. And, oh no, it's just one, sorry. And then we'll move on to our next story. So stay tuned for our final story, and then we'll move on to the next piece.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about times that music has changed the course of history. So we have one more of those before we move on to our next segment. From 2010 to 2012, protests sprung up throughout the Arab world countries like Tunisia, Syria, Egypt, and Lebanon. In Egypt, millions of people gathered in Tahrir Square in Cairo to protest the government of Hosni Mubarak, who had held power there for 30 years. Egyptian songwriter Rami Assam attended the protests and turned some of the movement's most powerful chants into a song, Irhal, above. Assam led the song in Tahrir Square, and protesters sang along with him, calling for the end of the regime. After 18 days of protests, Mubarak stepped down. The dictator was later sentenced to life in prison for failing to stop the killings of civilians during the protests. These historical events highlight the great power that music can have, both to create opposition and to bring freedom. For the musicians and everyday people who use their voices to combat injustice, the path ahead wasn't always a sure, safe one, but they kept on playing and singing to fight for what they believed in. So I liked these stories, hearing about music changing the world, seeing how music affects people, because music is quite important for us right now to keep our spirits up and stay together. So hopefully you've enjoyed them as well. Heeding health officials' orders to #stay in your house. You may be, at this point, only telling inside jokes. But with his 51 million fans on Twitter, Jimmy Fallon was able to pull responses from all over the globe for his Tonight Show hashtag segment, even though he's stuck at home, and he's gotten some of the funniest responses to date. If you haven't checked it out yet, while sheltering in his place, Fallon has begun producing homemade episodes for YouTube, calling them to the Tonight Show at Home Edition. They're very funny. They feature camera work by his wife and occasional segments with his two young daughters. Not only is he raising people's spirits, he also has raised tens of thousands for a different charity each day, starting with feedingamerica.org. For his in-home edition of hashtags, Jimmy tweeted to fans and asked them to describe their quarantine in 6 words. Fallon kicked off the hilarious social media trend by describing hashtag my quarantine in 6 words. Fine, you can paint daddy's nails. Rich Achowi joined the fun by summarizing Rika Chowi. Forgive me, I'm not sure what your ad is. By summarizing her days in the home like this. Yes, Netflix, I am still watching. So here are the other brilliant hashtags from people in their self-isolation. As an introvert, this changes nothing. Day 1, ate all the snacks. My quarantine in 6 words. Very relatable stuff, all of this. Longest day of my life, every day. Very fun. Expelled my kid from homeschool. I bet everyone homeschooling their kids can relate to that one. Flattening the curve, fattening my curves. Keep exercising, guys. Funyuns for dinner. Okay, breakfast too. Ooh, yes. Very good stuff. Is 7 Hot Pockets too many? My quarantine in 6 words. No. No, this is your time to treat yourself and do whatever you want, I think, right? There's not enough wine for this. My quarantine in 6 words. Very close to befriending a volleyball. My quarantine in 6 words. There are so many of these. Why don't we just keep going? Let's just check out this hashtag. There's a picture of a cat with a surgical mask that says, avoiding all unnecessary contact with humans. My quarantine in 6 words. Identity V is always with you. I don't quite get that one. Close your eyes, make a wish. My quarantine in 6 words. Do not enter, do not leave. My quarantine in 6 words. It's true. Let's see. Spend more time with true love. My quarantine in 6 words. And it's a picture of a puppy. Just a rat in a cage. My quarantine in 6 words. Let's see what else. Star Trek pajamas, Twitter, and snacks. My quarantine in 6 words. Puppy panic buy during pandemic. Oh, what a good call. Is this corona or just allergies? My quarantine in 6 words. Maybe check it out. Potato for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. My quarantine in 6 words. Family is hiding snacks from me. My quarantine in 6 words. At least milk dud is a tear. My quarantine in 6 words. Staying alive. My quarantine in 6 words. I'm never going to stop baking. My quarantine in 6 words. That's okay. Oh gosh, somebody posted a video of a cat trying to rip apart some toilet paper. She figured out about the crisis. Oof. There's a mom that's posted some makeup all over her face that says, getting makeovers from Mini-Me, my quarantine in 6 words. It's very funny. Day 2 of quarantine. Now what? 5 feet apart over and over. My quarantine in 6 words. Same as it ever was, unfortunately. Hospitalized husband and dog must improve. Beats the crap out of dying. My quarantine in 6 words. And passing it on to other people, I'd say, like let's just remind ourselves what we're doing this for. It's not just for us. It is for others as well. Quarantine calories don't count, do they? My quarantine in 6 words. I completely agree. What When we come back, scaremongering or caremongering. We'll talk about that when we return.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about Jimmy Kimmel's new hashtag that is keeping everyone's spirits up so they can tweet their six words quarantine. And now, anyone who pays attention to mainstream media, which is most of you, I'm assuming, if you're listening to this, to take a break from it, especially these days, has experienced scaremongering. But what about caremongering? Even as I write this article, my spelling software suggests that I change caremongering into scaremongering because there has never been such a word, this article reads. Well, that's no longer the case. Since Toronto residents, Mita Hans and Valentina Harper set up the first of what now totals 35 Facebook caremongering groups to help out people in Canada during the coronavirus epidemic in Halifax, Ottawa, Ontario, Annapolis County, Nova Scotia. People are joining the groups to enter to either ask for help or offer help, particularly to people most susceptible or most at risk of the more serious symptoms of COVID. Between the 30,000 caremongers of the 35 groups, Candemic attitude has served to reinforce the image of Canadian kindness. Scaremongering is a big problem, Valeria Harper tells BBC. We wanted to switch that around and get people to connect on a positive level, to connect with each other. It spread the opposite of panic in people, brought out community and camaraderie, and allowed us to tackle the needs of those who are at risk all the time. Now, more than ever. On the Toronto Caremongering Facebook group, 10,000 members regularly write either one or three typical posts. Hashtag ISO, which stands for in search of, hashtag offer posts, where people offer goods or services to people trapped in self-isolation, or hashtag shops, which gives info about the shops that are open or stocked. However, there are also discussion posts, like an introductory video that Harper posted earlier this week about how learning the Cree language can be something that people can do while self-isolating. I think there's an international belief that Canadians are nice. And I think that there's something Canadian about this because our population is small as a country. There's a tendency to look out for each other. Even if there are a few bad apples, of course there will be. Short inspirational stories or powerful reads. A great thing about them is that they're so easy to digest, and there's always moral at the end of the story. Whether there are true stories is Whether they are true stories is not another thing, as many of them are legends supposedly hundreds of years old. However, the stories I'm talking about are so powerful and inspirational that many of them get you thinking and leave you speechless at times. So without further ado, the 10 best inspirational short stories that this person has been reading lately. 10. The elephant rope. A gentleman was walking through an elephant camp and spotted the elephants weren't being kept in cages or held by the use of chains. All that was holding them back from escaping the camp was a small piece of rope tied to their legs. As the man gazed upon the elephants, he was completely confused as to why the elephants didn't just use their strength to break out of the rope and escape the camp. They could have easily done so, but instead, they didn't try to at all. Curious and wanting to know the answer, he asked a trainer nearby why the elephants were just standing there and never tried to escape. When they are very young and much smaller, we use the same size rope to tie them. And that at that age, it's enough to hold them. And as they grow up, they're conditioned to believe they cannot break away. They believe the rope can still hold them, so they never try to break free. The only reason the elephants weren't breaking free and escaping from the camp was that over time, they adopted the belief that it wasn't possible. The moral of the story is that no matter how much the world tries to hold you back, always continue with the belief that what you achieve is possible. Believing you can become the most successful. An important step is actually achieving it. Another one, thinking outside the box. In a small Italian town, hundreds of years ago, a small business owner owed a large sum of money to a loan shark. The loan shark was very old, unattractive looking, and it just so happened to fancy the business owner's daughter. He decided to offer the businessman a deal that would completely wipe out the debt he owed him. However, the catch was that we would only wipe out the debt if he could marry the businessman's daughter. Needless to say, the proposal was met with a look of disgust. The loan shark said he would place 2 pebbles in a bag, one white and one black. The daughter would then have to reach into the bag and pick out a pebble. If it was black, the debt would be wiped, but the loan shark would then marry her. If it was white, the debt would also be wiped, but the daughter wouldn't have to marry the loan shark. Standing on a pebble-strewn path in the businessman's garden, the loan shark bent over and picked up 2 pebbles. Whilst picking them up, the daughter noticed that he placed 2 black pebbles in the bag. He then asked the daughter to pick up one. The daughter naturally had 3 choices: refuse to pick a pebble from the bag, take both pebbles and expose the loan shark for cheating, pick a pebble while fully knowing it was black and sacrifice her for her father's freedom. She drew a pebble from the bag, and before looking at it, she dropped it in the midst of the other pebbles, and she said, "Oh, how clumsy of me. Never mind, look into the bag for what's left, and you'll be able to tell which pebble I picked." The pebble left in the bag, obviously black, seeing as the loan shark didn't want to be exposed, had to play along as if the pebble the daughter had dropped was white. The moral of the story, it's always possible to overcome a tough situation. I think that's important to us now. Throughout of the box thinking, you give in to the option that you might have to pick from. And I think that's an important one for us to take a break on as it really pertains to our story. So we'll have another couple of those stories when we come back from the break.
Pets bring such joy to our lives, and the GSMC Pets podcast is here to share in that joy. We'll tell stories of pets finding their forever homes, acting in unexpected ways, being helpful, or just being silly. Whether you love dogs, cats, llamas, reptiles, fish, or you've never met an animal you didn't like, the GSMC Pets podcast is for you.
Welcome back. Before the break, we started talking about some moral stories, and I want to continue with that because I'm finding them quite inspirational and uplifting. As a group of frogs was traveling through the woods, 2 of them fell into a deep pit. While the other frogs crowded around the pit and saw how deep it was, they told the 2 frogs that there was no hope left for them. However, the 2 frogs decided to ignore what the other frogs were saying. And tried to jump out of the pit. Despite their efforts, the group of frogs at the top were saying that they should just give up. They would never make it out. Eventually, one of the frogs took heed of what the others were saying and gave up, falling down to his death. The other frog continued to jump as hard as he could. Again, the crowd of frogs yelled at him to stop the pain and just die. He jumped harder and harder and eventually made it out. When he got out, the other frog said, "Did you not hear us?" The frog explained to them that he was deaf. He thought they were encouraging him the whole time. The moral of the story is that people's words can have a big effect on others' lives. Just think about what you say before it comes out of your mouth. It might just be the difference between life and death. There was a farmer who sold a pound of butter to a baker. One day, the baker decided to weigh the butter to see if he was getting the right amount, which he wasn't. Angry about this, he took the farmer to court. The judge asked the farmer if he was using any measure to weigh the butter. The father replied, "Honor, I'm primitive. I don't have a proper measure, but I do have a scale." So, how do you weigh the butter? "Your Honor, long before the baker started buying butter from me, I've been buying a pound of loaf of bread of him. Every day when the baker brings me the bread, I put it on the scale and give him the same weight of butter. If anyone's to blame, it's the baker." The moral of the story is, if you get what you give, in life you get what you give. Don't try to cheat others. The obstacle in our path, opportunity. In ancient times, a king had a boulder placed on the roadway. He then hid himself and watched to see if anyone would move the boulder out of the way. Some of the king's wealthiest merchants and courtiers came by and simply walked around it. Many people loudly blamed the king for not keeping the roads clear, but none of them did anything about getting the stone out of the way. A peasant then came along carrying a load of vegetables. Upon approaching the boulder, the peasant laid down the burden and tried to push the stone from the road. After much pushing and straining, he finally succeeded. After the peasant went back to pick the vegetables up, he noticed a purse lying in the road where the boulder had been. The purse contained many gold coins and a note from the king explaining that the gold was for the person who removed the boulder from the roadway. The moral is, every obstacle we come across in life gives us an opportunity to improve our circumstances. And whilst lazy complain, the others are creating opportunities through their kind hearts, generosity, and willingness to get things done. The butterfly. A man found a cocoon of a butterfly. One day, the small opening appeared. He sat and watched the butterfly for several hours as it struggled to force its body through the little hole, until it stopped making any progress and looked like it was stuck. So the man decided to help the butterfly. He took a pair of scissors and snipped off the remaining bit of the cocoon. The butterfly then emerged easily, although it had a swollen body and a small shriveled wing. The man didn't think anything of it and sat there waiting for the wings to enlarge to support the butterfly, but that didn't happen. The butterfly spent the rest of its life unable to fly, crawling around with tiny wings and a small and swollen body. Despite the kind heart of a man, he didn't understand that restricting cocoon and the struggle needed to get the butterfly through itself were God's way of forcing the fluid into the butterfly's wings to prepare itself for flying in the cocoon. Our struggles in life develop our strengths. Without struggles, we would never grow, never get stronger. So it's important for us to tackle challenges on our own and not rely on help from others. Controlling your temper. There was once a little boy who had a very bad temper. His father decided to hand him a bag of nails and said every time the boy lost his temper, he had to hammer a nail into the fence. The first day, he hammered 37 nails. The boy began to gradually control his temper over the next few weeks, and the number of nails slowly decreased. He discovered it was easier to control his temper than to hammer those nails into the fence. Finally, the day came where he didn't lose his temper at all, and he told his father the news, and his father suggested the boy now pull a nail out for every time he kept his anger out of control. The days passed, and the boy was finally able to tell his father that all the nails were gone. His father took him by the hand and led him to the fence. "You've done well, but look at the holes in the fence. The fence will never be the same again. When you say things in anger, they leave a scar just like this one. You could put a knife in a man and draw it out. No matter how many times you say, 'I'm sorry,' the wound is still there." Control your anger. Don't say things to people in the heat of the moment that you might later regret. Some things in life you're not able to take back. The next one. There was a blind girl who hated herself purely for the fact that she was blind. The only person she didn't hate was her loving boyfriend, who was always there for her. She said if she could only see the world, she would marry him. One day, someone donated a pair of eyes to her, so she could now see everything, including her boyfriend. Her boyfriend said, "Now that you see the world, will you marry me?" The girl was shocked when she saw that her boyfriend was blind too and refused to marry him. Her boyfriend walked away in tears and later wrote a letter saying, "Just take care of my eyes, dear." When our circumstances change, so does our mind. Some people may not be able to see things the way they were before and might not be able to appreciate them. There are many things to take away from this story. And let's do one final one. A shop owner placed a sign above a door that said "puppies for sale." Signs like this always have a way of attracting young children, and to no surprise, a boy saw the sign and approached the owner. "How much are the puppies for sale for?" The store owner replied, "Anywhere from $30 to $50. The boy took out some change from his pocket. "I have $2.37. Can I please look at them?" The shop owner smiled and whistled. Out of the kennel came Lady, who ran down from the aisle and followed by 5 teeny balls of fur. One puppy was lagging, considerably behind. It was lame. The boy became excited. "This is the puppy I want to buy." The shop owner said, "No, you don't want to buy that dog. I'll just give him to you." The boy looked and said, "I don't want you to give him to me. That dog is worth every bit as much as the other dogs. I'll pay full price." "You don't really want him. He's never going to be able to run and jump and play with the other puppies." The little boy reached down, rolled up his pant leg to reveal a badly twisted, crippled left leg, supported by a big metal brace. He said, "Well, I don't run well myself, so this little puppy will need someone who understands." And when we come back from the break, our final segment.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. So, for our final story here, we're doing another roundup story of some of the more positive stories that have happened. So a list of why it's not as bad as the mainstream media is telling you, okay? A Chinese company has shipped crates containing tens of thousands of respirator masks to Italy in their time of need, and has done so with artistic flair that of true Italian romantic. So they mailed it inside of the crates. On the side of the crates has an ancient line of poetry from the Roman philosopher Seneca. We are waves from the sea, leaves from the same tree, and flowers from the same garden. The European country has had a terrible time in the pandemic, and Xiaomi, announced its donation on Facebook, saying that the company felt a responsibility to a market which had welcomed them so warmly when the smartphone maker expanded to Italy 2 years ago. Since we arrived, we felt loved and deeply integrated into the life of the country, and this is why we felt a duty to support Italy in the management of the epidemic by donating its first important quantity of FFP3 masks. Another lovely positive story. The World Health Organization says there are now 20 coronavirus vaccines in development. Although there are still a number of logistical and financial hurdles that will need to be overcome in the race to deliver a vaccine to the public, WHO representatives say that they are working with scientists around the world to test and develop 20 different vaccines. The acceleration of this process is really, truly dynamic in terms of what we were able to do, building on work that started with SARS, that started with MERS, and is now being used to combat COVID. And Dr. Maria Kurevov, the technical lead for WHO's emergencies program, says in a press conference in Geneva last week, the collective body of research is remarkable, since the vaccines are in development just 60 days after a number of international scientists decoded to the virus's genetic sequence as it's shared with the rest of the world. Out of the vaccines, which are already being tested on a number of American volunteers in Seattle, have already illustrated the unprecedented speed in which the medical community is working together to develop a vaccine. Everyone is sharing face masks from individuals, countries in the world to world governments. Multiple businesses and schools have donated their recently rediscovered face mask treasure troves to hospitals in need. Other major tech companies such as Facebook and Apple are donating millions of masks and medical supplies to U.S. healthcare facilities. And Chinese companies are passing on their own stashes to European countries newly impacted by the virus. Taiwan is reportedly donating 100,000 masks to the U.S. American cities to close amidst outbreaks, population plummets. The U.S. states now benefiting from the same environmental silver lining. Pollution. Sorry, not population. Pollution. So since the closes, environmental scientists are estimating that the improvement in air quality could collectively save as many as 75,000 people from dying prematurely. And as physicians warn about potential ventilator shortages, research develops several low-cost solutions. In a stroke of genius, one scientist from the University of Minnesota went full-on MacGyver to build a makeshift ventilator in a matter of hours, although his team has revised the design over the course of several prototypes with the hopes of eventually submitting it for FDA approval. And an inexpensive ventilator is one that would be comfortable with someone to take care of me in an ICU or an operating room. Communities of countries opening up new lanes of free entertainment for the masses. In addition to Italian singing songs, homeowners have begun projecting classical films onto building fronts for neighbors to enjoy, and many services have also helped for the self-isolation. Amazon unlocked more than 40 new children's shows for children to watch for free, regardless of Prime membership. Audiobook has released a number of free audiobooks for users to stream from their devices. What else is doing things? Free virtual tours of zoos, aquariums, 2,500 art museums and galleries, and many other services. More than 100,000 people have already recovered from the virus worldwide. So that is a significant amount of people, so we can be very happy about that. Nobel Prize winner who correctly predicted the trends says we're all going to be fine. What we need to do is control the panic. We're all going to be fine, they told the news outlet. Celebrities and businesses have contributed towards feeding and caring for at-risk peoples. And no matter where you look, people are being kind to one another. People in small businesses are delivering groceries to their elderly neighbors in self-isolation. Kids are caring for the homeless. Social media users are setting up caremongering groups, like we talked about earlier. People are sharing their toilet paper with community members. There are even more stories of kindness and compassion being reported every day. So remember to keep your chin up during the weeks ahead, maybe months ahead, and remind yourself that the situation may not be as terrible as your social media feed might help you to believe. So I hope that this has helped in your time of self-isolation. Keep your chin up. Keep connected to your friends and family, virtually if you can. And remember that America is still beautiful. Okay? So thank you for listening to the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write us a nice review and rate the episode. That really, really helps us. And please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much for all of this. Do everything you can to keep connected to each other, even if it's just a quick Skype with Grandma once and again. If you needed to teach her how to do it, if you just go and see a neighbor, go say hi to a neighbor via Skype. Keep your social distance, but, don't keep social distancing from each other when it comes to online. Stay healthy. Stay happy. We'll talk to you soon. Good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmc.com. GSMCpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from social media news to marketing news, and even weird news, the GSMC Podcast Network has you covered. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast.